Hello and a very warm welcome to another episode of The Joy of Basing with me, Matt Cexwish. Today I will show you how you can build a really nice Kingdom Death face mask base for all of your Kingdom Death miniatures. The big issue that you might encounter when you have already purchased the game is that there are not so many of these little bases included. It is really a little challenge to find a nice way to put a really cool base under all of your Kingdom Death miniatures in an easy and convenient way. I want to show you how to do this by using some quite basic materials that you will be able to find in a well-sorted hobby store. And actually I will show you two different ways how to build single bases and also continuous bases without any constraints regarding size or shape. Today we will be building a Kingdom Death base. This base is set in the so-called plane of faces. It's a rather flat area where the ground is actually made up of stone faces. Most of the time the bases that come with the game are these small ones, and I wanted to show you a way how to make bigger bases out of these smaller ones. For this we will be using silicone, which is a silicone that is usually used by people who make dental impressions. This silicone that we will be using is called polyvinyl siloxane. It is actually an addition reaction silicone elastomer, so an addition silicone. It is a thick liquid, so to say, that cures or dries very quickly into a rubber-like solid, taking the shape of whatever surface it was lying against while curing. It is also very fast curing, so it only takes around 5 minutes for it to be completely set. And as it is used in dental applications, it is also non-toxic. So here you see how I scoop a similar portion out from both components that the silicone comes in. I'm using this brass spoon for this because it's just the perfect size and I don't have to measure it using a scale or something like that. Work with this material pretty quickly because, as I said before, it is very fast curing. So we are rolling this into something like a pancake on our little cutting mat here. And then we simply press one of the plastic bases that the game comes with into this mixture. It's also good to bend the sides up a little bit in case you want to pour something like plaster afterwards. After 3 to 5 minutes this should be cured, and you can see that it really caught all the detail, which is really nice. You can also stamp several of these at the same time to quicken up the process of casting quite a lot of them later. Once this is dry, you can also choose to cut the edge of this mold up a little bit. This way you will be able to create some kind of stamp for a seamless application of the motif. Here I'm using a special kind of plaster from a local shop. It's called Hobby Shop. The plaster is something that is similar to plaster of Paris, but it is more fine and more stable. It also goes under the name of Ceramofix. It is usually, I think, mixed with some kind of glue to give it extra stability. It is similar to porcelain actually, and this is why I really like to use that in base building. We have to mix it in a ratio of 4:1 of plaster to water, And we will also add a little bit of black pigment. If something breaks, and we can use this in gaming as well, you will not see the crack so visibly if this is already black. The exact ratio is not very important of how much pigment you give into the mix, but it is important that you more or less keep the 4:1 ratio of water to Ceramofix. If you have too much water, as you can see here, you can still pour some additional Ceramofix afterwards, but yeah, you should not wait for too long because this is also setting quite fast. Here I'm using a sculpting tool to first add some of the now finished mixture into the very hard to reach areas like noses and eyes. I really want them to come out nicely, so this procedure takes a little while, but it is really worth the hassle. After this, I use a synthetic brush to further reach all of the little details like the forehead, the cheeks and the chin area. You don't need to add anything like a mediator between the mold and the plaster that you put inside. The silicone is so smooth that nothing will stick to it when you try to remove the cast from the mold. So yeah, just do as you want. You don't need any silicone spray or talcum or anything like that. Once the fine details are filled out, I use a dropper to further add some of the plaster into the mold. And repeat the whole process with all the other molds while the plaster is still liquid. Remember to wash your synthetic brush after that, because you want to use it another time, so it is important to keep it clean. Now I will show you how to make this continuous surface. In this case it's again on a dice box, but you can usually do that on a surface that is really big as well. So for this we will be mixing some black milliput, as you can see here. The black milliput, again, I use this because it is great to not see the crack. If something happens to the base, it will be just black and not white or gray, so it will be less visible. The black milliput actually is also, I think, just like a regular milliput. It behaves the same way, hardens in the same way as usual yellow-gray milliput, but it has something like, I think, like coal or some kind of ink in it. So it is really nice for certain applications, especially for base building. I could have also roughened up the surface of the dice box a little bit, but the milliput is so sticky that it will just cure on top of that base and not go anywhere. After applying the milliput on the surface, I push the putty down towards the sides. That way I will not have a seam showing in the end. Now we take the cut mold that we have prepared before and gently press it into the milliput. As you can see here, you don't need too much pressure and the details come out rather nicely. It's also good to do it, as you can see here, that you cover the edges first and then have something like a little part in the middle that you will then just cover with one single print. The middle is a little bit tricky to catch, but with some practice you will be able to do that and also eliminate these little lines that occur where you have placed the mold. If you are very precise, you can also take a sculpting tool and resculpt or like soften out the lines that occur on the base, so you will have a perfect result. Then you take a hobby knife and trim the edges of your base, so you have less work sanding that down in the next step. Okay, this is done, so time to dry. In the meantime, we will have a look on our bases here. The plaster usually takes around, well, 2 hours or so to dry out, so you can use it. In this case, you can see that the cast came out really nice. The detail is very impressive and nearly as good as with the original, especially for these flat basing elements. That is not a big problem. You might also have noticed that in this base here I have not poured it entirely. This is because I also want to have separate masks like this one here. You can then use that as a kind of brick when you build the base and want to have single elements, so you can have single masks like that very easily. Also, the casts are a little bit thick, so we are taking our magic sanding board that we have been building in the first technical video. It is a wooden board to which we have glued different grained sanding paper. That way we will have an easy and very convenient way to sand stuff that is flat very quickly. Also use a brush to remove the dust that collects in the sandpaper to reuse it again and again and again. Now we will take some cork. I have cork mats of different thicknesses, so this here is from 3 millimeters to I think 5 millimeters. We also use some old pliers or like clippers to get these edges here that are very straight often to give them some randomness. So yeah, use your old clippers and just bite some chunks out of there. And keep the chunks because you never know what size you might need for your base. Once this is done, we can glue the cork to the base. But before we glue it, it is important to find a pattern that we like. It's really like a jigsaw puzzle, so after a while you will find a nice pattern that you like. Once you have chosen the composition of your cork, you can then remove the cork one after another and glue it with some thick super glue that in this case I have put on my latex glove. Here I'm using some super glue accelerator to quicken up the process of drying, and voila, that's how the base looks now. If we want to do the same thing onto a dice box like this one here, it is important to roughen up the surface before we glue the cork. That way it will bite itself more easily to the base and just hold a little bit better. Always remember to cut away from yourself. Here it's not so visible, but yeah, be very careful using your hobby knife. It's usually pretty sharp. Okay, again we use some thick super glue and we have arranged a nice little composition of these cork shards which we now glue to the base. As you can see here, the accelerator actually affects the plastic, so yeah, always test that on a separate piece before you start to glue. Okay, now it is time to glue the Ceramofix casts onto the cork here. So again, super glue on top of the cork, and then we start to puzzle down these individual pieces of base plates, face masks, so to say, on top of this cork here. If you want to make 100% your vision of that base, you can also do all of these face masks individually and then put them like little bricks or like tiles. But yeah, this process will take much longer and it is difficult to achieve a nicely looking effect with that. It just takes a lot of time really. So a combination of the two, like using bigger chunks in clusters and placing individual faces is what worked out best for me so far. To use these big pliers to remove individual face masks that are not yet glued, and also to break some of the masks up a little bit. That way we will come up with a nicer looking effect in the end of some of these masks being like destroyed or like cracked, and this is exactly what we are aiming for. Okay, some super glue accelerator and this is all glued. Now you see that the edge comes out very irregular from the mold, so this is something we can eliminate by using a hobby knife and cutting the edge up a little bit, breaking the base in the process maybe, but that's not so bad because we need like irregularly broken pieces, like clusters anyways. So there you go, no more straight edges, everything is a bit more irregular, so this is what we were aiming for. It's also good to try out different positions of your clusters. If it doesn't work in one way, just turn it around and yeah, slowly puzzle all together and put it on top of the cork. You can also break the plaster parts on top over the edge like this. That way only the ones that are really on the base will stay on the base. And again, you can help with some pliers and break that more locally. It's also great to have these recesses here and these bigger cracks. These you can use for some light source, for example, or put some blood there, some goo, something just that breaks this very flat base up a little bit and makes it more interesting. Alright, the next step is to take some wood glue. In this case it's some Ponal Express mixed with a little bit of water to make it more liquid. And we take our synthetic brush to apply that wood glue on top of the cork that is still showing. Here we are then adding some bird sand, some very, very fine bird sand that covers the glue from the top. So we then further increase the textures in this base, make it more interesting, and yeah, just give something of a texture to it that is different than cork. And also scrape off the excessive sand so very quickly using our sculpting tool, and that's done. You will be able to find bird sand in a pet shop, and it is also good to have a container for that to pour the remaining sand down when you don't use it anymore. And yes, this is how the two bases look. The continuous face base doesn't need any sand because it is entirely covered by face masks. The only thing it needs is some sanding of the sides so they are completely flat. For this we will be using our magical sanding board again. Start with the rougher coursed paper, in this case I think it's a 200 grain, then continue to the medium 400 grain paper, and then finish off with a 600 grain to really make it very, very smooth. Okay, this base here also needs some sanding. You can actually leave the base on top also quite rough, as you see here. But in this case I want to show you how you sand it if you want a flush edge. Here it's important to go more slowly than when you have only a little bit of the side hanging over. That way you will be able to remove the material more carefully and also cut some of these face masks away so they don't just come flying down when you do it too hardly. On the finer paper you can also go in circular motions. Step by step you will be able to create a very nicely smooth surface. Okay, this is how the bases look after sanding them down, and the other one with the deeper cracks is also sanded down now. You can see that most of the noses came out really nicely, so the detail is really, really good. Okay, and this is how we do that. Next step will be painting these bases. Okay, so this is how you build the bases. I hope that you enjoyed the video and that you think that this is like easy to follow. Yeah, please tell your friends about us. That would be really, really great and help us to bring you more content like that in the near future. Thank you very much and have a great day. Goodbye.